Hi, welcome to my channel where we question everything. Today's topic is about the recent developments in the Ukraine and the counteroffensive in Kharkiv. And it seems to me I've watched the video again from the Duran, which was published on Monday, and they were discussing the various developments. And it seems to me that, as I've expressed many times, I usually take the flip side of the coin and I argue the other side. And it seems to me I found, two guys with which I can differ and then provide an argument. So I would like to address what they have said. The main concept or the main item they were discussing was basically whether the special military operation of the Russians have changed and it has escalated. As we all know, there was an attack, apparently, on Sunday on the infrastructure, which was actually a power stations located in the Ukrainian-controlled areas. And that caused a blackout into various large cities on the eastern side of Ukraine. And what it also caused, it caused the railways basically to be disabled, since there were electrical locomotives transporting military equipment and reinforcement to the Ukrainians in the counteroffensive just south of Kharkiv. And as soon as the power was disrupted, the trains came to a stop and the Russians bombarded the trains that were now sitting ducks by the Air Force, and they were destroyed. And what the Duran or Alexander at this stage is arguing or trying to promote is that the focus or the objective of the special military operation of the Russians have now changed, where the first time they actually have attacked and destroyed some civil infrastructure. Now, the way that I always see it is that at this stage it's still an emotional reaction, and Alexander actually views the whole operation still from a Western point of view. And I think that's where the cardinal problem lies. One has to review all actions from the Russians based on their Russian culture and how they see the world and what they want. And that makes a huge difference. Now, firstly, the military generals or the military command, they don't work on emotion. And if there's any general that makes decision on emotions, then that general should be fired immediately. At the end of the day, the generals have a responsibility, which is huge. They have a responsibility to their political leaders, but they also have a responsibility towards their soldiers and their lives, and to win a war. And based on that, they have to act logically and systematically. And if I looked at the recent bombing of the civil infrastructure, one has to ask the question, but why did Russia suddenly do it? Because it's counterproductive. The Russians have always maintained or tried to not destroy civilian infrastructure. And there's a good reason for that. Because if they take over the area and they've destroyed the power system, then they have to rebuild that power system and a water supply. And that costs money. So why would you destroy it? It doesn't make sense. The Russians don't behave like the Americans. And it should be actually obvious. So it makes no sense to destroying the civil infrastructure, especially the power station. So if the Russians really want to up the ante, and they really want to become angry, as Alexander said, and say, up till now, and this is it, if we went too far, then the Russians should have bombed civil infrastructure in Kiev in the west of Ukraine. And they didn't do that. They bombed civil infrastructure in the eastern part, where they are actually active. And that's counterproductive. So my opinion basically is that it was a strategic military target. By bombing the infrastructure, the electricity supply, they stopped the supply lines of the Ukrainian forces, and they prevented the resupply of armaments and ammunition and all the other logistics requirements. It's very difficult to hit a moving target. So the logical military strategy, in my opinion, would have been to disable, bring the electricity, bring these locomotives to standstill, and then destroy them as they are basically immobile. And even what they have destroyed, it was repaired fairly easily by the Ukrainian government. So it wasn't like destructive, a permanent destructive which couldn't be repaired. It was a temporary destruction of civil. So for me, it was a valid military objective. And there's no reason to assume that the scope of the special military operation of the Russians have now extended and the gloves are now off. That's a little bit putting it too far. Again, if you look at the history or at all the actions of what Putin has done throughout these years, he has showed immense patience. And he never reacted emotionally. And even if you look at the sanctions that were applied to Russia, everybody was shouting and saying, yeah, but the Russians must make counter sanctions and react to this. And no, Putin just didn't do it. Why? Because he realized that the sanctions were self-defeating and it will do more damage to the Russian economy than it would do to anybody else. A typical example would be the behavior of the small Balkan countries like Estonia, Latvia, and so on, and how they react. I mean, those guys are the most fanatic anti-Russians you can get, and when they blocked the transfer of goods via their territory to Kaliningrad and so on, it was a violation of international agreements. And Russia could have acted aggressively, but they didn't do it. They still stay calm, and they didn't do what everybody else expecting, which was their full right, but they didn't fall into that trap. And the same is being applied here. Putin is not going to react emotionally. I'm not. Alexander says he's very stubborn. I don't know. But what I do know is that he's not stupid. He's very strategic, and he has a lot of patience. Then if you also look at the behavior of Russia, yes, they are trying to do everything according to international norms, laws. And that is very important for them. Because if you have any argumentative discussions or argument or debate, that as soon as you transgress the rules, you have lost the argument. Those are the basic rules of the game. And if Russia suddenly starts, just because it's a war, to break international laws, then he will become the victim and will be easily able to counter-argument and making the boogeyman. So Russia and Putin has to be very careful in not breaking international law. And if you look at the propaganda of the West, I mean, everybody that really knows what this counteroffensive south of Kharkiv was, it was basically a forward movement of Ukrainian troops into an area where there were no Russian soldiers to defend it. And the few that there were fought back in order to protect the retreat and inflicted heavy casualties. Well, that's what they say. So if it's true, well, then it's true. It's not true, doesn't really matter. But the bottom line is, the Ukrainians have advanced. They actually got an empty victory. But if you listen to the propaganda, the media, The Ukrainian leadership and the world is making a big hoo-ha, which is actually ridiculous. It's a fake. It's a fantasy. Russia has to stop in any case of offensive. It's fully capable of doing it. And I'm sure it's actually doing it at this moment while making a video. Because if they don't stop it, then these guys will advance, and then retake the whole of Lugansk. But what the initial figures that I heard was about that there were 9,000 troops. Alexander talks about 15,000 troops. But even 15,000 troops is not enough. That's a small force. The bulk of the Ukrainian army is still in the south and in other areas of Ukraine, like Odessa and Kiev and so on, that protects those areas. So I'm sorry, I cannot agree to what they are saying, but I have to find fault with their assessment. I will leave it here for today, and maybe do a follow-up on another video that they will make. And then we'll see what has happened in the next couple of days. And in any case, if you like the video, press the like button. If you want to hear more, then subscribe to my channel. Only takes a second. And thanks for listening. Cheers for now.